Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. We're back with you in a beautiful day outside. We've had a lot of rain around here, and we're really thankful for it because here in East Texas, we need rain all the time, and the Lord has been very gracious to us over the last week. In fact, some of us were thinking maybe a little too gracious. We got a little tired of that rain falling all the time, but anyhow, God's been good to us, and He's been good to me of late, as He always is, much more than I deserve. But of late, I've been getting this little voice keeps saying Jacob's ladder, and then I'd think about it, and I thought, well, even the smallest child knows about Jacob's ladder, and I'd dismiss it. But this kept happening, and so I thought, well, maybe the Lord's talking to me. Maybe I need to get in there and have a look at it. Well, I did, and as is usual, not usually, as is always the case, the Lord has something to say to me. When He calls me to a particular area in the Word, He's telling me that I don't know all I need to know about it. And so I got in there and started really digging into it, and this became very personal to me because I'm French on my mother's side, and the French people are the descendants of Reuben, Jacob's firstborn son. And the idea that Jacob had to have his name changed to Israel when he was converted, and I thought, well, Lord, I sure hope my name's not Jacob now. I sure hope it's Israel, and in your eyes anyway. So this became very personal to me. But what we're going to be looking at is Jacob's ladder, which actually in our vernacular would be staircase, the stairs, Jacob's stairs. And what the Lord showed me is something that we all know this. Those of us that study the Bible know this, that conversion is not just a one-step deal. And of course, salvation, we don't even have salvation in this age. That won't come until Jesus returns with salvation in His wings. All right, He will bring salvation with Him. But we're talking about conversion. They're the steps that we have to take to be converted. I want to bring to your memory what Jesus said to Peter. Peter was His number one disciple, Peter was the one always doing the talking. Peter was the one that Jesus said, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom. And He said to Peter, this was just before Jesus died, and He said to Peter, now Peter, when you are converted, help your brethren, meaning help them to become converted. And the first time that I really read that, it hit me like a rock. I thought, wait a minute, are you telling me, Lord, that these disciples who have been out here preaching your gospel, healing the sick, casting out demons, even the shadow of Peter falling on people healed them, been walking with you for 3.5 years, hanging out with you, listening to your every word, touching you, eating from your hand. Are you telling me these people were not yet converted? Yes. That's exactly what God was telling me. And that's really, and this happened a long time ago, that realization, but then you tie that in with Jacob's ladder, and you're going to see that what we've been taught all of our church lives is simply not true. And I've known this for many years, but the Lord has just recently began to put this thing together for me to get real specific with it. You've heard me say many times, things aren't like we've been told they are. We're not saved. But I didn't realize until some relatively recently that even the conversion process is a works affair. It is something we have to take steps to be converted. You would have thought that Peter and the other disciples were converted. No, they weren't. not until Jesus died and they realized how much they needed him and how far that you can get from him simply by being normal. This is why God says we can't be normal. His people are not normal. He says his people are peculiar, strange, different. Different from all other church people, different from the rest of the world. Let's look at what makes us different. Let's look at the steps that we must take to conversion. Jacob. All right, we go with Jacob here. Let's lay a little background for this guy. Jacob was a sinner. Now he was the son of Isaac. He was the second son of Isaac. Esau was the firstborn. Esau had the birthright. But Jacob, you remember the story. Esau was born, and then Jacob reached out of the womb and grabbed Esau's foot. The word Jacob means grabber. Now, don't ask me to explain all of that because I can't. I just take God's word for all this stuff. That's some of that is a mystery to me. But anyhow, God's in charge, and what He was doing was showing us, those of us that strictly want to obey Him. Look, Jacob was not a nice guy. He was slick. He was slimy. He was backdoorsy. You had to watch this guy because he'd pull the wool over your eyes. He'd cheat you. He'd do all these things. And he was the one that God had chosen to produce His chosen race of people. And here he was, not a very good person to begin with. Well, look at Paul. You know, the Apostle Paul became God's number one spokesman and number one writer of the Bible, but look what he did before God got hold of him. But he was chosen before the beginning of time. Paul, God already knew who he was. Paul was marked by God. He he had a choice. He said, I have a choice, but I better not take that other choice, because I've been chosen by God. He knew that, you see. And here's this guy called Jacob. Well, here's the story, and you know the story, so I won't go into it in great detail. Esau comes in one time, and he's hungry. He's been out in the field hunting, and he had killed something, obviously, as we find out later. But it takes time to process like a deer or something like this. So he was hungry right now. When he walked in, and there's Isaac cooking up some soup. So it's around lunchtime. Now let's understand about Esau. He owned the birthright. Now the birthright went to the firstborn son of any man. Whatever that man has, when he dies, the first son, the birthright son, gets an extra portion of everything. Everything that he has, he gets a double portion of it. If he got 10 other sons, then he gets a double portion, and then the other 9 sons have to divvy up, what's left. So this birthright is important. Not only do you get a double portion of everything, if you're the birthright son, you also become the leader of the family. Upon the death of the father, you become number one. You become the boss. Now, that's important. Being the birthright son is very important. That birthright means everything. You become number one, and everybody else has to follow your orders, and you get a double portion of everything, you see. Now, God expects people to appreciate that birthright. It is important. It's very important to God. Well, Esau comes in and he says, well, how about a bowl of that soup? Isaac says, aha, I've got him right where I want him. And Jacob says, well, if you'll give me your birthright, I'll give you a bowl of soup. Think about that. He was trying to cheat his brother Esau out of his birthright. Now here's how that worked, and I don't understand this, but I know how it worked. You could give up your birthright. You could give it up voluntarily. Or you could do it like Reuben. You could sin your way out of the birthright. The father could cut you off if he wanted to. Now, so Jacob said, I'll give you a bowl of soup if you'll give me your birthright. He said, I'm starving to death here. Yes, I'll trade with you. Well, he did. And then Esau went on his way, and Jacob then realized that he had just gotten himself, or bought him, or cheated himself, the birthright. But there was a ritual that had to be followed. The father had to literally pronounce the birthright upon the firstborn. Well, you know the story. Esau was a very hairy man, and Jacob was a smooth man, the Bible tells us. And so here comes his mother, and she says, look, let's do this. Let's really fool your father. We've got to really do this right, because she wanted Jacob to have the birthright. And she told him how to do it. She said, we'll get some skins and we'll put on the story. And he went in and he pretended to be Esau, and he fooled. He deceived his father. Well, see, there's that name. That grabber, sneaky, cheater, And he deceived his father. And then, of course, here comes Esau. And by this time, Esau had dressed the animal and had cooked some of the meat, and he brought it in to his father in a form of stew, because his father really liked that kind of meat. And that's when the whole thing blew up. Then you know the story, and you know that Esau said, I'm going to kill Jacob. Well, Jacob's mother got hold of that information, and she sent him running. She said, you go to Paddan Aram, to my people, and you stay there until Esau cools down. And of course, here goes Jacob running. He was literally on the run. And he didn't waste any time. He got out of town real quick. Jacob realized, what we'd say, he came under conviction. He was running. He knew he had done the wrong thing. He knew he had cheated. But he didn't say, well, no, let's reconsider. I cheated him. No, he didn't. Like I said, he was a sneaky dude. He's going to run, and he didn't know how long, but he would get that birthright. Eventually, it would become his. So then we go to chapter 28 of Genesis, and he's on the run, and the first night he's running. And he's running. In our way of thinking, not very far. But when you're walking, it's a long way. But when you look on the map, he wasn't that far away. But he was sleeping, and he had a dream. And in this dream, the Lord showed him what it's called a ladder in the Bible, but we know it as a staircase. Showed him a staircase. Step, 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 step. Into heaven. It's a long way up there. And at the top of that staircase was God. Now, you'll notice in the Bible that there's a lot of symbolism. Now, God didn't say to him, now, Jacob, you've got to climb up here to me. But we know, if you study the Bible, you know he was literally saying to Jacob, you've got to come to me. You're under conviction. You want help. You want to be converted, is what we call converted. You've got to come to where I am spiritually. Now, he couldn't climb that ladder physically, like the angels were doing, but he was telling him, you want to be my child? You've got to come to me spiritually. You've got to walk with me. He said, can two walk together if they don't agree? Well, who's he talking about? He's talking about us. He's talking about Paul. He was talking about Jacob. He said, if you want to be with me, you've got to come to where I am spiritually, you see. Now, that's not what we hear. It's not what we hear from church. What we hear from church is, well, when he called, he's just standing right here to your side. It's not an upward movement, it's just a side step. You just turn around and say, I believe in you, and it's all over. It's done. Jesus has already paid the price. He's already taken all the steps. You're already there, you see. Not only are you there, you're not just converted. You are saved, you see. It's all a lie. It's all a lie, ladies and gentlemen. We've been lied to from day one. And my job is to expose that lie. And I do the best I can to do that. Now, Jacob was just like Paul would be in the future. Remember what Paul said when he fell off that horse blinded? He couldn't see anything except this bright light, and he said, who are you? And Jesus said, I am Jesus, whom you persecute. And what was Paul's next question? What would you have me to do, Lord? Paul had enough sense to know that guy's a boss. And I need to get with him. I need to be where he is, and he's asking the Lord, what do you want me to do? And the Lord said, well, the first thing you've got to do, go into this town and stay there till I send somebody to you. And Paul did exactly what God told him to do. They say, well, Paul had caught on pretty quick. There were some steps to be taken before he can become right with God. And so the first step was to go into town, to a certain place, and stay there until further orders. Well, God doesn't always deal with everybody in the same way, but we don't, as members of the church, so-called, we don't say, Lord, what would you have me do? We have somebody standing in front of us and says, here's what you do. You believe. You believe. That's all you do. Well, Paul believed immediately. He knew who he was dealing with. Jacob knew who he was dealing with, but that didn't convert either one of them. That certainly didn't save them. There were steps that had to be taken, and this whole Bible concerns all the steps that we have to take, and I'll prove this to you. Now, okay, here we have Jacob. He has gone to Paddan Aram. He has met his future wife. He falls in love at first sight. You know how that goes. And then he gets tricked into marrying her sister. There's a long, drawn-out story there. But he sticks around, and Laban, his father-in-law, notices that the sheep that Jacob is in charge of, they're just multiplying rapidly. I mean, he's very successful. Everything he's touching out here is going good. And his sons, though, they're responsible, the sheep they're responsible for, they're not multiplying like Jacob's sheep are. So Laban realizes that this guy has some power behind him. There's something going on with him, and I'd better, be nice to him. And so he just keeps, he's making Laban rich. And Laban says, well, what can I pay you, how can I reimburse you or recompense you for all the good you're doing for me? Well, remember, Jacob hadn't been converted yet. He's still sneaky. He says, well, I'll tell you what. He says, when the sheep drink, they'll come in all at a certain time and they'll drink. Well, that's when they mated. When sheep mated, when they drank, that's when they mated. Well, somehow or other, to show you how conniving and shrewd this guy was, Jacob, I'm saying, he figured out that if you put stakes, wooden stakes in front of the sheep when they were drinking and mating, if you peeled a little stripe, we've all done this as boys, You get a limb and you peel a little bit of the bark off of it or something, and we know what we're talking about here. Said if we do that, then the sheep would produce striped babies and spotted babies. And so he started doing that, and his sheep just absolutely went, wow. And he said to, before he did that though, he said to Laban, he said, I'll tell you what, you give me, just let me have the striped ones and the spotted ones. Well, until that time, they were just a few of those. He said, let me have those. Those will be mine to do with whatever I want. And Laban says, oh, I got myself a good deal here. Because the vast majority of the sheep were not striped or spotted. He thought, I've got me a good field hand here, and he's working for almost nothing, Well, that's when Mr. Slick Hand, Jacob, began to do this, put these stakes in front of the sheep, and suddenly the sheep just began to produce these spotted and striped sheep, I'm telling you, the guy was slick. He was very good at what he was doing. Okay, this went on for many years. He had a lot of children, and of course he had accumulated a huge number of sheep, and probably some camels. There's no telling what all he had. And he had, not only did he have a large family and a large number of livestock, he had really overpowered Laban. He had really cheated him. Those were Laban's sheep. And if he'd been the man he's supposed to be, he'd have said, look, I know how to do this. I know how, I'll do it for everybody. All of your sheep will do this. And then Laban would have just become filthy rich. But Jacob was still a little conniving, you see. Well, this many years later, Laban has caught on to him. And he's getting mad, and his sons were getting mad too. So here's the conniver again. Here's the grabber. He said, "I got to get out of here." And here he is again on the run. Okay, this is what you do when you're under conviction. You try to find a place to hide. So he's running from Laban, Laban's sons, and one night he has this visitor. He sent his wife and children, you know the story, out ahead of him. And again, now wait a minute, he's got word that Esau is coming with 400 soldiers. And what does Jacob do? He sends his wife and kids out and puts his wife and children ahead of himself, between him and Esau. This guy was a toad. Really, he and not a very good person. Well, he's laying down asleep, and all at once, or getting ready to go to sleep, and all at once this man appears. And they get into a wrestling match. Now, I don't understand all of that. But the man, it says in the Bible, was God. And he was wrestling with him. And he wouldn't let him go. And God said, let me go. He said, no, I won't let you go until you bless me. Now think about this a minute. He said, I'm not going to turn you loose, whoever you are. Well, he knew who he was, because he said, you can bless me. Well, not just any man can bless you. He knew who this was. And what blessing do you think he's talking about? What blessing do you think Jacob was talking about? Spiritual. He knew he was in trouble. Again. He stayed in trouble. He's always in trouble. He's always doing something wrong. He's in trouble again. His life is at stake again, see? And he's heading back to the promised land. He's heading back home. Because he knows back there he has the birthright waiting on him. Under deep conviction, because he was not yet converted. Well, he had not climbed the stairs. You see, God had shown him many years earlier. He said, you've got to climb these stairs. You've got to come to me. Well, he had ignored him, and he had cheated his father-in-law, and he'd done all these things. Here he is in trouble again. His life is in danger again. He had not climbed the stairs. Well, he had not joined, in other words, he had not joined the Lord at the top of the stairs. He had not been converted. Now, he was still a babe. In other words, he knew the truth. He had spoken to God. God had spoken to him. But he was still a babe, in what they call in the Bible, we call it a baby. He wasn't where he's supposed to be going. He wasn't even going in the direction he's supposed to be going. He hadn't even turned in the direction he's supposed to be turned to. He had not matured. And the Bible, the word righteous means mature. And we're going to have another closer look at that in the next session. Now, if you supposedly belong to the church, you're told you are already spiritually at one with God. If you join our church and jump through our hoops, you don't have any ladder to climb. You don't have any stairs to climb. Jesus has already climbed them for you. All you've got to do is believe. Just believe. I was watching a program one time, a man that I like to watch, and he had a very important public official on his program, and this man was, well, he called himself a Bible teacher. He taught his denomination's version of it, but he was also a news commentator, and that's why I watched him. And he asked this public official, let me put it this way, he was the #1 public official in Texas. All right. He said, well, how is your soul? And he said, my soul is great, I know Jesus Christ. And I thought, that doesn't make your soul great just because you know Jesus Christ. The question is, does he know you? Does Christ know you? Well, what he was saying is he was a typical church person who believed he didn't have to climb anything. He had already arrived. And he arrived the moment he said, I take Jesus as my Savior. He's saved, supposedly. Is that what God says? Not what he said to Paul. It's not what he said to Jacob. It's not what he says to us. And no matter how many times we're told, you're now saved, that doesn't make it the truth. It's not the truth because it's not of God. Now, what we're going to be doing starting next time, we're going to look at these steps. We're going to take about the first 3 or 4 steps and specifically what those steps are composed of, and then the rest of them is the Bible. It's Genesis to Revelation. Those are the steps that we need to take to get to God. We're not there yet, ladies and gentlemen. Don't let anybody tell you that we are. We're just trying to get converted. And we're going to look at true conversion and what that really means. And we have to get there. If you're not there yet, you have to get there. You have no chance to be saved if you don't get converted, truly converted. And we'll start looking at that next time. So until next time, get in the Word of God and study it.